Newsfirst, Newsline with Faraz Shaukat Ali.
And a very good evening to you and a warm welcome to Newsline Live, although it's a recording. This evening my guest is Mr. M.A. Sumanthiran, who's Member of Parliament from the TNA, and it's been a while since he's been here, but he's right here. Very good evening to you, Mr. Sumanthiran.
Good evening to you. It's good to be back on Newsline.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Sri Lanka's troubles are still around. All the different crises are around. Although the exchange rate is in some form of fluctuating flux, and I don't know whether that's good, bad, or of no consequence. But what of elections now? Now, bearing in mind this, what I call a people delivered product, a determination from the Supreme Court to not, basically to allow you to have the elections.
You see, elections are the foundation of any democracy. If you don't have elections at due intervals, then the country ceases to be a democracy. That's how serious it is to postpone elections. So, although we have an economic crisis, I don't think it's an optional extra. The elections, they are fundamental to the functioning of the country, and so that it is on that basis that we've campaigned that the elections must be held in time. In fact, it's 1 year late already. Local councils completed their terms last year, and it was possible under the law to extend it for another year, and that was done. So it's already overdue. So it must happen. Lack of funds is not the excuse at all.
Especially when they've been voted in.
The budget which the government itself presented, the finance minister is the president himself, and allocated money for elections for this year. And so Parliament had approved it. So Parliament has total control over public finance. Parliament has allocated these funds for elections. It is not for the executive to hold that back.
And so we can safely say that the elections will be held. There's a date now announced, isn't there?
Yes, but the date is actually later than what is required by law. What is required by law is for councils to be in place by the 20th of March.
Right.
So that is why we said this must happen on or before the 19th of March.
Right.
9th of March was the date fixed.
Right.
And then there was a delay because the government printer said I can't continue to print ballot papers because ST, the Secretary Treasury, is not releasing the funds, I have no police protection, etc. Now, since that controversy arose and the Election Commission postponed the elections, it's barely been only about 10 days. So, yesterday when the Election Commission met and decided on the new date, they could have actually put it off by 10 days to the 19th. Because the number of days they lost as a result of this non-cooperation by the Secretary Treasury and the government printer was only about 10 days.
Right.
So that is why we insisted that it must be held on or before the 19th as the law mandates. Nevertheless, having said that, now that the Election Commission has fixed a date, and they fixed a date without consulting with the Secretary Treasury, we said they don't have to consult. In accordance with the order made by the Supreme Court, the Minister of Finance and all those who work under him must release the necessary funds.
Actually, when we talk about this release of funds, there is some people may conjure up images and visions of the Treasury Secretary loading cash into some safe cash transit van and sending it off to the Elections Commission, and him unloading this and having piles of cash with which to pay the police and whatever. But it isn't the way
it isn't that
happens.
way. It's just book entries.
Yeah.
It's all between government departments. So you credit the government printer, you credit police.
Yeah.
Actual cash does not pass.
Yes.
So this is just a red herring,
Yeah.
really, to say that there is no money.
Yeah.
You make your book entries and then settle it.
It really almost insults the intelligence of the average
Of
man.
course, to say, and the quantum
Yeah.
that is necessary, even if you were to pay cash,
Yeah.
is not such a big sum
Yeah.
compared to what the country loses monthly on various things.
Yeah.
You see, so it is a question of priorities. And it is on that we say, well, it goes without saying, you don't even have to argue this case,
Yeah.
that for us to remain a democracy,
Yeah.
to be even called by that name, you must have the elections in due time.
Okay, so let the people will hope that there are no more rabbits to be pulled out of this proverbial hat, whatever.
Yes, but I see that even today or yesterday the President has said that this is not the time for elections. You see that we can't accept that, because this is mandated by law, and if it is a country where the rule of law prevails, then this must happen. Already we have lost the provincial councils.
Yeah.
Right, due to legal tangle that was created. I brought private members bill to unlock that.
Yeah.
That didn't go through. Thereafter there was a parliamentary select committee in which I made those submissions.
Yeah.
It was accepted. The report of that committee says,
Yeah.
yes, you can have provincial council elections by correcting the law in this way.
Yeah.
Now that also hasn't happened. The reason why I am saying this is, if you don't have local councils also,
Yeah.
then you don't have local councils, you don't have provincial councils,
Yeah.
and the parliament you have is one that has a false majority.
Yeah.
It's a parliament that has lost its mandate.
Yeah.
And the president, who was elected by that majority, in whom all of executive power still vests,
Right.
despite what they said about the 21st Amendment, he's still a powerful executive president. So, without all of this,
Yeah.
it will become a country where one man has all the say and he rules.
And yet it was, Sri Lanka has something like this. Freedom has many difficulties and democracy is not perfect, but Sri Lanka has never really missed having elections on the basis that somebody is unable to do a book entry. With all due apologies to John F. Kennedy, but it beggars belief, really. But these lies, these damned lies, are actually unacceptable, because it's a bit like this statement by this president who assured, I suppose, the Tamil people, and said that the 13th Amendment must and will be fully implemented because it's part of the law. And now what's happened?
Nothing, he just said it, and that's all. It was also strange that when he said that, there were protests that happened, or so it was shown. Now, in the last government, when he was Prime Minister and we cooperated with him in drafting a new constitution, etc., the draft that he presented to Parliament in 2019 January went well beyond the 13th Amendment. There were no protests, right? There was consensus on that issue from all parties. So it seemed a little strange that this time round, when he kept on saying, I'm going to implement the 13th Amendment, and that there were protests. And you don't have to shout it from the rooftops. That's a constitution that you have sworn to uphold. You are the executive. The law has been made 35 years ago. So just implement it. You don't have to raise such a hue and a cry and have objections coming, and then you don't do anything about it.
So once again, the people have been let down.
Yes, but I think the people didn't have any expectation.
No.
Neither did we. You might recall that while we went along and had those meetings with him, right through that process, we expressed our skepticism. We said we don't think anybody is serious about this, but just so that no one blames us for not cooperating in this, we fully cooperated. But as we realized, and our people also knew that this is not a serious effort.
And so what will your party do about this now? What can be done? How will you move forward?
Well, we will insist on a new constitution for the country.
Yeah.
That's been accepted by everyone.
Yeah.
We will carry out our campaign and try and convince everyone, particularly the South, that sharing powers of governance doesn't split the country into two. It only makes contented citizens everywhere. People can have access to powers of governance in their own localities, that everyone needs it. You don't have to have a centralized power that nobody can actually reach. It must come down to where they are. So these are some efforts that in recent times we have been doing, and we will continue that campaign to the point that the majority of the country as a whole will agree and accept that must be implemented.
I keep hearing that from many Tamil people that the 13th Amendment is not really enough. It must be something more like federalism.
Yes, of course, we stand for federal arrangement. You see, large number of countries in the world have federal arrangements, and if you look at those countries, those are the stable, powerful countries. Federal arrangement doesn't make a country weak. On the contrary, it makes it very strong. Look at India. The very fact that India has stayed as one country is due to that one fact, that powers of governance have been shared amongst these so many different people. Even the whole idea of linguistic states has helped keep that country together. So these are the facts that must be told. As far as the Tamil people are concerned, yes, 13th Amendment to the Constitution is no solution, because it doesn't share power in a meaningful way. You see, there is no judicial power devolved. Right? Legislative power, yes, provincial council has been given some legislative power, but supervening power is with the central legislature. It can make laws even over provincial subjects, and that will, hold over this. The governor has to give his assent even to the provincial council statutes that are made. Executive power is exercised by the governor. So there is no sharing of powers of governance. The president's nominee, agent, the governor, exercises powers even when a provincial council is in session. So that has a framework, yes, it has provinces as a basic unit, etc. But it must be meaningful sharing of power. So this is what Mahinda Rajapaksa said when he was president soon after the war ended. In 3 separate joint statements made with India, he used a particular phrase. He said full implementation of the 13th Amendment and going beyond to make devolution meaningful.
That's what he said.
That's what he said. Of course, these are only all statements, and we haven't still seen.
No different from what President Wickremesinghe said then.
Exactly.
So little wonder then that they may find it difficult to attract the voting up in the Tamil-speaking areas then.
Of course, they won't get any votes from the Tamil-speaking areas. No, but they won't get any votes from the other areas as well.
And on that note, let's go for a quick break and take a peek at this evening's headline news from that wonderful News First Primetime News team. We'll see you on the other side of the break with Mr. M.A. Sumanthiran as our guest.
News First, Newsline with Faraz Shaukat Ali.
Ruling party MPs call for elections to be delayed. 300 million rupee advance payment required for local government election printing process. Railway workers gear up for a strike from next week. University teachers protest against tax policy. Academic activities hampered. University students take to the streets against oppression. Opposition condemns use of tear gas on protests.
කල්ලිකුතු කඳුළු ගෑස් උණ්ඩ ගහලා තියෙන කියලා අපිට විශ්වාස කරන්න කරුණු තියෙනවා.
Education Minister calls for action over police entry into university premises.
23% for 2 months, 25% for 4 months. Valuable FD.
News First, Newsline with Faraz Shaukat Ali.
And welcome back to Newsline Live. We are in conversation this evening with Mr. M.A. Sumanthiran from the TNA, Member of Parliament there. Mr. Sumanthiran, I thought I'd just go back to some of these other things that are sort of in the topic, if you like. What about this, the release of private lands in the former conflict areas?
Most of the private lands were released during 2015 and 19.
Right.
Beyond that, nothing has been released.
Right.
In January this year, the President came and said to have released some lands, 108 acres.
But that was not...
that was actually released in 2019.
Right.
Released meaning that the military actually left those places, but they were not handed over to the owners. So this is only the process of handing them to the owners. Even that hasn't still completed as yet.
Right.
So there are still many lands, private lands, that are still in the occupation of the military, and that has still not been.
And your position is that the military have no bona fide reason to be occupying those lands?
Yes, of course. They were under the impression, as soon as the war ended, that all of this land has been taken by them. They fought a war, and they have taken the land. And they
this
thought
is the spoils of war?
Spoils of war, and it's for them to keep. But that's not the truth.
Is there any reparations for this land?
No, nothing. Even when it is returned, no reparation has been given for the military having used it for 30 years in some places. Even now, they are using a large portion of private land on the east side of Palali for their own agricultural purposes, while the owners are in welfare camps. But they make no reparations for that, and owners are also not interested too much in reparation in that way or compensation. They want their land back.
Do you think it will ever happen?
It has to happen. We've made a lot of progress over a long period of time from 2003 onwards.
Frustratingly slow?
So 20 years now. We've made, frustratingly slow. Nevertheless, there has been progress, so we won't let up until all of this land is actually released.
So you're going to chip away?
That's how it has been. So we will continue that process.
Are you hopeful that some future government will be inclined to recognize the distress in the people of the north?
Well, there were signs from the Araga layer that the youth of this country from the south were more sensitive to a lot of these injustices that people in the north and east have had to go through. So that was a silver lining. And I hope that sort of grows and becomes a dominant narrative in the south as well. I'm fairly hopeful that can happen.
And what's your take on this proposed Truth Commission?
The truth must be ascertained.
Yeah.
There is no question about that. Even in the 4 pillars of transitional justice, ascertainment of the truth is the first pillar.
Yeah.
Without the truth being ascertained, you can't proceed. There is no question of reconciliation, there is no question of reparation, none of that will happen properly. But for the ascertainment of truth, there must be a proper mechanism that actually finds the truth, not something that sort of helps the government to get over the difficulties they have with Human Rights Council or something else. So that mechanism must be an independent, authentic mechanism. The government has been talking about setting up a Truth Commission. We haven't seen the legislation yet, but if it is a process that is governed and controlled by the government, then it won't have any traction. Our people won't have confidence. See, in a Truth Commission, for a Truth Commission to succeed, the people must have confidence in it, particularly the ones who lost out, the victims.
But a lot of people I spoke to on this subject, they don't seem to have any faith in a local mechanism.
No, that's why I'm saying a local mechanism would mean the government controlled. This was a dispute, a confrontation between government and the LTTE.
So
how can you have one faction run a truth mechanism? No, it can't. It won't work at all. It has to be independent. For it to be independent, since one faction is the government of Sri Lanka, it necessarily must be international.
And other countries, I suppose, who are willing and able to come and
of course they are willing and able to come and help. We've had some process in South Africa. Various other countries have had this kind of mechanisms, so you can draw from their experiences. It must be a genuine effort. And any effort that is done by the government alone will not succeed, and we will also not recognize it.
When I mentioned to someone that you coming on program, they said perhaps that what they need is implementation and not more and more commissions on several matters.
Yes, of course. You see, LLRC, Lessons Learned and Reconciliation Commission, when the report came out, we had our own criticism of it, but we said implement it, we'll support it. We actually printed a book of our response to it and said implement these things, we will support it. So there have been commissions and commissions and commissions, and now we had a commission to look at the reports of all the previous commissions. So this is an absolute joke, right? What are all these for? You have to take the steps that are necessary to be taken and implement those.
Moving on a little bit, Mr. Sumanthiran, what about all these lands that are sort of cleared and barren? Well, I mean, they are cultivable, but it's empty. The wars ended many years ago, and what was dark and grey and sort of war-torn is now lush green and so on.
Yes.
But what about the opportunities for the people there to work, to create businesses and to get on with life?
That's very, very important, because merely releasing the lands is not enough. You must give them a leg up, you must enable them to get on with life. Those were people who lived fairly, I might even call luxury lives, because they were wealthy. They tilled the soil, they had cows and they engaged in animal husbandry, fisher folk, the large catch of fish, all of that. But now, after the war ended, now we have 13 years and they are still unable to get on with it. So that economic recovery is something that is missing, and we need to concentrate on that. Now that the country itself is in a mess, perhaps an economic recovery targeted in those areas will help the whole country move forward. So we must have plans. We have spoken to the President about this because we have a large diaspora that's wealthy, who can make some difference.
Absolutely.
But of course they left this country with bitter memories, etc. So for them to come back and invest, the political situation also must change for the better. So all this is in one whole. You can't separate this and that and say will economic recovery. No, economic recovery will not happen until there is political stability and goodwill from all the peoples who inhabit this country.
And a confidence that the legal system will work and their rights enshrined in the Constitution will be upheld.
All that. So that is why you can't do this piecemeal. You can't say, well, let's do economic recovery now and then we'll look at democracy and then we'll look
it has to be a multi-track.
Yeah, it's a multi-track. It's one whole.
Do you think, Mr. Sumanthiran, that slowly but surely the diaspora whose land of birth and origin is here in this country in the north, that they will slowly come back and invest their money and their technology and their techniques?
Yes, they are very keen, but as I said, they don't. I mean, it won't happen slowly. It will happen in a dramatic way, even if there is a dramatic change in the attitude and in the governance structures of this country. That will happen, but they must see that change happening.
Finally, Mr. Sumanthiran, just to ask you, what do you make of in Sri Lanka? This is mainly to you as a legal man. Sri Lanka has got so many issues going on. We had the bond scam, the alleged bond scam. It's still going on. There's no resolution on anything. Then we had, on the 9th of May, was it, when these people emerged from the residence or the office of the Prime Minister, the residence, Temple Trees, and went sort of nobody disturbed him. They just marched straight across to Gulf Face and they attacked these peaceful, up until then, peaceful protesters. And no one's been held accountable for that. And then we had the tragedy of international proportions that the whole world stood up and looked at, which was the Easter tragedy. We still don't know anything about that. And at the same time, almost tongue-in-cheek, we have ministers who say that Sri Lanka is open for business. Really? Are they, with all this?
Yeah. So that's a key thing that you have touched. Accountability is an important element. So even with regard to solving the Tamil national question, as it were, accountability plays an important part. That's why truth is important. So fraud, corruption, etc. are some things that have pulled this country down even economically. So far, no one has really been convicted and sentenced for large-scale corruption in this country.
Indeed.
You have one party ruling the country, the other one keeps shouting, you are corrupt, and they expose with it. Roles change, then they start shouting. I think there is kind of an agreement between both, that you only shout when we are on this side, but we don't really
no implementation
put anyone behind bars. And so they've taken this country for a ride for a long time, and that is why this country, and particularly the youth of this country, are asking for a system change. What they mean by that is that this whole system is corrupt and useless and doesn't serve the people.
Perhaps that is why a country like South Korea is so successful, because there was once upon a time, and this is not a fairy tale, so once upon a time South Korea's GDP was less by $1, less than Sri Lanka. And today it is several times much more. There are quite literally universities in every corner. And most importantly, 4 South Korean elected presidents were at some point given jail sentences.
Yes.
The fact that they may have been released after that, ahead of their term, was to do with medical and all sorts of other things. But the fact remains that their justice system did jail them.
That's very, very important. Without, solving the corruption issue and having a proper accountability mechanism, we will never move forward. The IMF, and I must congratulate those who dealt with the IMF for the package that will now come available to us. But the IMF in their very first communication said there are corruption susceptibilities. They flagged this, right? And if we don't address, can't address it by just passing a law.
No.
You see, passing a law, we already have so many laws. Implementation, you see, that has to be done. Without that, the economy will not recover.
Mr. Sumanthiran, thank you very much for being on Newsline Live.
Thank
It's
you.
been a pleasure as always having you.
Thank you very much.
That's the way it was on Newsline Live, a recording with Mr. M.A. Sumanthiran. Thank you for watching, take care, and thank you for the questions that you may send us on tomorrow's program. Take care, and as always, God bless you all.